Welcome to Bottle Rocket with Alena Sycheva, your top hockey podcast. Welcome back to Bottle Rocket. I'm Alena, joined as always by Maeve and T-Back. Our guest today is Matthew Blittner, one of the most prolific hockey authors and historians of our era, a five-time hockey author, Devils writer for Sportsology.com, where he also writes the weekly NHL column Blittner's Blue Line, and co-host of the Blue Line Blast podcast. Matthew, great to have you with us.
Oh, wow. Heck of an intro right there. Glad to be here.
Okay, first I got to ask you a very personal question.
Oh, no.
Based on all my conversations with you and all the work you've done, how many hours sleep do you get a night? 1 or 2 hours?
Can I say half an hour?
No, seriously. I mean, I on a typical night with all the work you do, how many hours sleep do you get?
Less than a handful, to be very honest. Less than a handful.
Okay, congratulations. Looking great.
Matthew, you've written several hockey books over the years. Which one are you most proud of, and what makes those stand out for you?
I mean, each of them holds a different place of significance for me. My Ranger book was my very first book. In fact, I was still Maven's intern at the time, so I don't know if he's ever had an intern write their own book while still interning for him. And that one came out right as the Rangers were doing their 25th anniversary of the 94 Cup. So, that does hold some special things. The second book was my Devils book. That one, proved that I wasn't a one-hit wonder, so to speak. So that was impressive for me. My Ireland book meant that I got to go back to my roots, because when I first started my internship with the Maven, he had me covering the Islanders with him. So for me, that was a full circle moment. Voices of the NHL is one of a kind. It's the only hockey book where, and at the time, because obviously now we have Seattle in the league, but every team was represented by at least one of their broadcasters, and it was about the broadcasters, not about the teams. In fact, there is a copy in the National Archives at the Hockey Hall of Fame. They put a copy there. And then Game Winners was my return after taking a year and a half away from writing. It was my return to hockey media, and I co-wrote it with my friend Russ Cohen. So each of them holds a different place of significance.
I want to say something right now. Matthew is probably the most underrated writer about hockey in terms of what he's done. Now, I got a book here. This is, it looks cockeyed, but it's Unforgettable New Jersey Devils, Games, Moments from the Press Box, Ice, and Front Office. Okay? So I'm doing a piece now about Johnny McClain being inducted into the Devil's Circle of Fame. And I open up this book, and I can't say that I remember every single chapter, but I remember that Larry Brooks, who recently passed away, an outstanding hockey journalist, Larry Brooks was interviewed by Matthew, and the chapters in the book. And there was so much meat in it that I'd forgotten. He got Larry to talk about when Larry worked for the New Jersey Devils for a couple of years during, a very growth period, and so many interesting things. And every single one of this guy's books is filled with facts. And I just want to say that I didn't do anything to make this guy what he is today. He did it on his own. And I don't know what kind of award you should get, but I have to tell you that this guy is not good. He's great, okay? G-R-E-A-T, not G-R-A-T-E like John Tortorella.
Well, thank you for that, Maven. But I have to admit, I wouldn't have become a writer if it wasn't for the internship with you. I like to always tell the story. I hated writing growing up. I also didn't like hockey growing up, but that's besides the point. I was not a writer. I had a teacher in high school who prevented me from taking an advanced placement class because she said, and I quote, "You are not a good enough writer to handle the workload." and I didn't fight it. I knew I was not a good writer. But then learning from you, learning from other writers who I met along the way, really helped me become a writer. And in terms of the Devil's Book, the chapter that you mentioned with Larry Brooks, I remember when I first got a chance to write a weekly column. I was at New York Extra, and I'd asked you, what advice do you have for someone who's going to be writing a column for the first time? Because I had written plenty of articles, but never a weekly column. And you said, find a columnist like Larry Brooks, read his columns, and figure it out. Well, I actually went to Larry about 2 days after that, and because I saw him at the arena, and I said, out of curiosity, I was told to read your columns, which I was already doing anyway. What is the best piece of advice that you have for a columnist? He told me, come back in 5 minutes. I'm going to go get some coffee or tea. We're going to go sit down and chat. He said, by the way, who told you to say that? I said, no one told me to say that. He said, well, who told you to go read my column? I said, Stan Fischler. He said, okay. He said, so you've got two people whose columns you should read and two differing styles and figure out what works best for you. So I like to think that I got some of my writing style. Of course, Maven, you always said, cut the, trim the fat, keep the meat, trim the fat. So that's what I learned from you. And from Larry, I learned how to structure certain columns and how to, what might be a good column. And of course, he does mention in that book a number of things about the Devils. I thought you were actually going to go with the Ken Danito chapter, because Dano says that game, the Johnny Mac game in '88, was what changed the franchise and turned the franchise around. In fact, he scored the first goal of that game, and he was so excited and so nervous energy that he had only been like 15, 20 seconds into a shift when it happened. Now, in the 80s, shifts weren't 45 seconds. They'd be a minute and a half, 2 minutes. He had to immediately come off the ice because he was so nervous and so overcome that he actually had to end his shift early and get off the ice just to compose himself.
I just want to tell one quickie, then I'll leave it over to T-Bag, because I had forgotten this. We're talking about the Devils making the playoffs for the first time, last game of the season. They're in Chicago, and they have to win. If they tie or lose, then the Rangers get in. This was a decisive game. The Rangers already played and won. They beat Quebec, so the Devils had to win the game. Now, Larry Brooks, who's now working for the Devils at the game as the PR guy, but he also was in the broadcast booth. So when the winning goal was scored in overtime by Johnny McLean, Brooks was doing the broadcast, but as the PR guy, he had to be down in the dressing room. So he's up at the top of the Chicago Stadium, which is about as far up as you can get. And then he has to get down into the bowels of the stadium to the press room. And he tells this story about how he had to hustle down there and do, he actually should have been two persons. It was a great story, great story. And that's the kind of stuff this guy is doing all the time, which I love to read, and why I say he should have a bigger name. His name should be in bigger lights than it is now. Okay, T-Bag, your turn.
Hey, Matthew, it's an honor to have you on the show, and I'm really nervous about this, actually. You said you were not a hockey fan growing up. What were you?
Baseball, all the way baseball. So I'll tell the story quickly. My dad is a huge Ranger fan, always has been. He's really more of a sick hockey fan because he watches every single hockey game every single night. He has it down to a science where all the games that start at 7, he watches. Then when the game starts 7:30 or 8, it'll be the intermission for the 7 o'clock game. He has it down to a science. He watches every game until the conclusion of whatever the late game is. So in 1996-97, he got tickets for March 11th, Rangers Red Wings at Madison Square Garden, the only year that Messier and Gretzky were on the team together. And we were sitting, he took me, I was 3.5 years old. We were sitting directly behind the Ranger bench. No, the only thing in front of us is the little walkway for like the employees. There's no fans between us and the glass. About midway but midway through the game, a puck comes up over the glass, which is not uncommon, as we all know, and he catches it. Now, my dad loves me very much, and I love my dad very much, but he gave it to some other little boy sitting near us instead of to me. So, as you can imagine, I wasn't feeling too good about that. 2 months later, almost to the day, he takes me to my first ever baseball game. Yankees, Tigers, again, Detroit, New York, Detroit, both situations. At Yankee Stadium, we're sitting in the 200 level, even with the first base dugout, so even with the Yankee dugout. Fell in love with baseball, played baseball. I think I started playing T-ball 3-4 years old. And was a baseball fan throughout. I fast forward to 2011, 2012. I'm a freshman in college at SUNY Albany. And the Rangers, as everyone knows, were about a year ahead of schedule at that time in their building to becoming a contender under John Tortorella. And my dad he used to come up visit me and say, if the Rangers can win this game, it means that they're a true contender. And there were a lot of those games through the year. So towards the end of the spring semester, I just got back to my dorm room. I just taken a final, and I'm watching on my little TV, and there's nothing on that I'm interested in watching. Nothing at all. None of my friends are around. They're either studying for a final or taking a final. And so I finally get to the very last channel, and the Rangers are playing the Capitals in a playoff game. Now, at this particular moment in my life, I can name you exactly one hockey player, Wayne Gretzky. I can tell you that the object of the game is to put the puck in the net, and it's played on ice skates. That's all I know about hockey. I don't know anything else. Game's tied in the third period. Game goes to overtime, and I'm like, oh, this is pretty exciting. So I'm calling up my dad, being like, Dad, you'll never guess what I'm doing. I gave him like 20 guesses. He didn't figure out any of them. I'm like, I'm watching the Ranger game. So, of course, he had been watching the Ranger game. So game goes to overtime. Game goes to double overtime. Game goes to triple overtime. Marian Gabbert scores the game winner, I think, with like 6 minutes and change left in the third overtime. And I was just hooked on the excitement of it. I came back from my semester a week and a half later, roughly. Went out. The Rangers were now going to be playing the Devils in the Eastern Conference Final, the famous Henrique finals. And I had gone out and bought 2 books, 1994 and Battle of the Hudson, which, of course, detail the Rangers-Devils rivalry. And I started noticing a lot of similarities in the series in 94 and the series in 2012. Rangers lose game 1 both times. Rangers win games 2 and 3 both times. Some overtimes involved. Rangers go into game 6 down 3-2. Obviously, 94, Messier, hat trick, third period, unbelievable moment. I'm thinking, well, Brian Callahan's the captain of the team. Maybe he'll pull out something. Well, Callahan scored the game-tying goal in that game 6. So you can see the similarities of where it's going. Now, of course, Callahan didn't have a hat trick, and Adam Henrique, on my 19th birthday, as my friends are sitting in my house and we're getting ready to go out, scores the goal that Doc Emmerich so eloquently put as, it's over. Well, so was our night. But from that moment, I was hooked on hockey, and eventually got a chance to work in hockey, and I've never looked back.
That's awesome. Matthew, you've covered all 3 New York area teams with books, the Rangers, Devils, Islanders. Which organization was the most enjoyable to work with, and which one gave you the toughest time? What made the difference?
Can I get in trouble with any of the PR department for what I'm about to say? So the Devils definitely gave the best access. I'll put it that way. The Devils gave the best access. I remember Pete Albeets, who, the terrific Devils head of PR. I had requested, if I could come to the arena for a game to, do a couple of interviews with, like Ken Danico, Steve Cangelosi. We had done an interview off-site, but with Bryce Salvador. And he actually, even though I had no, periodical affiliation to have any right to go there, he said, sure. Gave me a credential, said, anytime you want to come, by all means, just, send me an email, reach out. Matty Laughlin, was great about being like, listen, anytime you need a credential, just, shoot me over a text and, I'll speak to Pete if he hasn't gotten back to you. So the Devils were phenomenal with that. The Islanders, I mean, I was doing that book just as like the middle of the book was done as COVID was breaking out in the world. So as you can imagine, that just presented some logistical challenges in and of itself. Um, and the Rangers, even though I was on the Ranger beat for the Maven at the time, actually, they, for their own reasons, said we will not help with this book project. So I will say, to this day, I find it very impressive for myself, if I may toot my own horn for 1 second, that I was able to track down the people and get the interviews that I did while not having the help of a PR staff. So that's what I'll say about those books.
Who are a few of your favorite players to deal with from each team?
Current players or retired players?
Both.
Okay, so I mean, with the retired players, I mean, I've gotten to know some of the greats from all three franchises. I mean, Mike Richter and Adam Graves, over with the Rangers. Even Derek Stepan, who's but that was I actually did cover him while he was playing. From the Islanders, Bob Nystrom and Ed Westfall are always great about taking a phone call or anything. And I guess Chito Resch sort of qualifies for both. Chito Resch with Devils and Islanders, Ken Danito, Bryce Salvador, even like Bruce Driver, Marty Brodeur, even, get to see him around the rink, Sergey Brelin. They're all great with that. I will say that current players, the Rangers in their era, 16, 17, 18, that time, I mean, Brady Shea, Derek Stepan, Ryan McDonough, JT Miller, Henrik Lundqvist, Dan Girardi, like, they were all great to deal with on a day in, day out basis. Islanders, I mean, I'll never forget this. And Maven, you might actually get a little annoyed at what I'm about to say. My very first season as his intern was the 16-17 season. Around the end of December, I believe it was, Maven, you went to Portland and then Israel to see your sons, to see Ben and then to see Simon. But you told me to still go to the games at Barclays Center, so I did. And so, I'm there with the MSG Networks crew, and I'm so used to doing all the things that I used to have to do for you that, I'm still trying to do all those things even though you're not there. And so a couple of the MSG Networks people pulled me aside and were just like, listen, Stan's not here. It's okay. You can relax. It's vacation for you too. He's on vacation. You're on vacation. Just, act like a normal journalist. You don't have to act like an intern right now. So go into the Isles room after the game. And for whatever reason, no one was talking to Anders Lee. I don't know why. He had scored a goal in the game. I don't know why there were no reporters gathered around him. But I figured, okay, what the heck? I'll see if he's willing to give me, a minute of his time. He didn't just give me a minute of his time. He gave me 15 minutes of his time. To the point where the PR staff was saying to him, listen, like, you got to go. And he's like, I'm having a good time here. And 2 days later, when they had their next game, I'd gone up to him just to say thank you. I wasn't planning on interviewing him again. My notebook was filled to the brim. And he goes, you need anyone else? I was just like, I don't know. He goes over to Anthony Beauvillier, pulls him over, goes, Bo, I want to introduce you to someone. Introduces me to Beauvillier, introduces Beauvillier, and I said, Bo, why don't you sit down and give him at least 7 minutes of your time? And so that was absolutely great. And some of the MSG Network people afterwards, they were looking at me, they were like, how the heck did you, what the heck did you, I said, I don't know what I did. I walked up, I guess they like that I'm young like them, as opposed to, all of you who are, much older than them. That comment didn't go over too well with the MSG Network people, but, I got some pretty good interviews there, and I was always grateful for that. And then from the Devils, I mean, just being around them on a day in, day out basis currently. I mean, Nico Hischier can be intense, but he's a captain. He speaks his mind. Dougie Hamilton can be interesting. You gotta catch him in the right mood type of thing. Brett Pesci's always willing. Brendan Dillon's always willing. Jacob Markstrom, for as much as Devils fans wanted to want to just put him down, he owns up to everything, and he can give as good as he can take. He went through a rough stretch. Actually, just last night he actually played a very good game, but he went through a bit of a rough stretch, and as you can imagine, in the room afterwards, people saying to him, Jacob, listen, like, what's going on? You're not playing well. And he'd be like, listen, what are the stats? Okay, what are the stats on you right now? How many times have you screwed up at something? So he can give as good as he can take. So just each of the teams has different players who I like dealing with.
You've been in the media side of hockey for so long. How has the job changed since you first started?
Wow, so long. I'm in my 9th year as a credentialed writer. My first year as a member actually of the PHWA, the Professional Hockey Writers Association, finally. And I want to say the biggest difference, and this isn't a difference brought about by the changing media industry, it's actually the way the world has changed. Before COVID, even after a game, regardless of which of the 3 teams you want to talk about, be it Rangers, Islanders, or Devils, after a game, whether the team won or lost, there'd be a number of players in the room who you could go up to and speak to. You might be able to catch someone one-on-one. It might be part of the media scrum. Maybe it would be a combination of the two. But you'd have a number of players in the room, and there weren't any requests. If you were working on a specific, article, you might say to the PR staff before the game, hey, listen, can so-and-so be available? But for the most part, you'd have options. Then COVID came about, and obviously for health reasons, you couldn't go into the room for a while, about 2.5 seasons worth. Now, and you notice this especially, Devils-wise, who I'm around most often, that's not there anymore. You have 2, maybe 3 players after a game. It's requested by the team digital reporter, occasionally might be requested by MSG Networks, and that's it. So there's no real one-on-ones. Yeah, if a player is willing to wait around after the media scrum, if they're willing to still talk for a 12 minutes, okay, that's fine. But for the most part, everyone's saying the same quotes. Everyone's saying the same sound bites. There's no real one-on-ones again, unless there's like some specific special thing going on. So I'd say that's a big change. Also, the rise of more like video-based content. I mean, podcasts were around in 2016, 17. I'm not going to say they weren't. But, there are periodicals now who only want their writers to only do like YouTube shows instead of like a written article. So those are the changes of everything. Like people aren't reading, people aren't watching, even if it's more than, let's say, like a TikTok video of 30 seconds. So you really have to adjust to that. I mean, back when I was Maven's intern, I remember I did a feature for him on Mike Richter and his company, Bright Core Energy. And if you want to look at the word count, and Maven, there's no disputing what I'm about to say because I have the word count still, so I have the proof. I have the receipt. It was 6,000 words. Okay, 6,000 words on the dot, which he demanded we break up into 4 distinct separate articles, 4 parts, because 6,000 words was just too long for the Fischler Report newsletter. Well, people at least would read 6,000 words then. Now you can't get someone to can't get people to read, let's say, a 1,500 word article. The Associated Press is having its writers do 200 word game recap with no quotes. 200 words might be a paragraph and a half, might be 5 sentences. How are you supposed to? So that's the change in the industry.
Yeah, well, I have to say, thank heaven for NHL.com. They still run full stories. Every game story has quotes and all that. But I agree with you, Matthew. But I still, my hockey news stuff, I'm still writing pretty long. And like the piece I'm going to do for the website, based on what I was just saying, using your book. I asked the guy, he said, how many words can I do on Johnny Mac for the for the piece, and he said 2,000 plus. Well, that's what I like to hear. I'm not, I'm not. I don't know about how you feel, T-Bag, but things have changed.
No, I still love reading the articles on, the game, the day after, because everything's kind of settled down and you're not, in the actual moment, so you got time to think about it, and then the writers can actually put their own, nuance into the story, and so that's what I really enjoy. I still really enjoy reading the Matthew. I just ordered your Voices of the NHL book.
Oh, thank
Um, Merry Christmas. And I was wondering, did you get to interview John Shorthouse, the voice of the Canucks?
No, so for the Canucks, I got Brendan Batchelor, who was their radio voice. What I did, so the way Voices of the NHL came about, actually, when COVID came about in March 2020 and the world shut down, including sports, about 2 weeks into the pandemic, Kevin Weeks started doing Instagram lives. And I don't think anyone before that even knew that Instagram had a live feature. And he started having like a weekly guest or like a nightly guest, and they would just shoot the bull. They would talk how they would talk anything pretty much. And so I had reached out to Kevin because we knew each other, pretty well. And I texted him. I was just like, what is this that you're doing? And he's like, you should do it too. He's like, plenty of people should do this. He's like, what other hockey and sports content is there going to be right now? He said, there's no games being played. He said, we don't know when the heck we're going to be back. So I thought about it, and I started doing an Instagram live sports talk show of my own that actually started out as once a week, then became twice a week, 3 times a week. Eventually, it got to the point where it was 8 times a week. There'd be a Wednesday double feature. And I had a lot of broadcasters from around the NHL. I'd have writers from across. I had other sports involved too, but by and large, most of my guests were NHL broadcasters, and they all had great stories about, how they got to where they were, or, games that they had called. And so I said to myself, you know what? This would make a great book. So I reached out to a total of the broadcasters who I was more friendly with than just, hey, are you willing to come on a show for an interview? Like broadcasters who I would legitimately talk to, every few weeks, like Matt McConnell, who at the time was with Arizona and is now doing great with Utah, Ken Daniels with Detroit, Jim Fox out in LA. And they were all just like, yeah, it sounds like a good idea, and we're willing to, make whatever connections we can. So I took the NHL media guide and I sat at my computer for hours and sent emails to, and I kid you not, every single broadcaster who was listed in the NHL media guide that year. Every single one of them, whether they were a play-by-play, color analyst, studio host, studio analyst, rinkside reporter, radio, TV, national network, team-based network. Didn't matter. I sent email to every single one of them. There were over 400 to be precise. I heard back from 60 of them. I heard back from 60 out of 400. Now, not everyone actually had their email listed. Some of them I had to use journalistic skills to figure out their email. Like, there were some networks that, okay, you'd see what their PR email, their PR person's email was, maybe it's their first name dot last name at, and then the name of the network.com. Well, if that's if that's the naming scheme for their email for their PR, then by and large it stands that it would be the same for their broadcaster. Now, is that always the case? No, but it was enough where I was able to send emails out to everyone. There were a handful of broadcasters who declined to be interviewed for the book for a variety of reasons. But out of the 60, I believe it was 56 of them said yes. Some teams had, only one person represented. Some teams had 2 or 3. I think the LA Kings actually had the most with 4. And then, I had the national networks, and that's how that book came to be. And I made it my mission. I updated everyone on social media after every interview. There were 3 days in the span of a month where it was a Friday each time where I did 10 interviews a day. And each interview would last on average an hour long. And I would just go 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. an interview, 9 a.m. to 10, 10 to 11, 11 to 12, so forth. And that's how the book aimed to be. And the most difficult team to get, and you guys are gonna laugh because of the New York connection. You know, I'm a New Yorker, I'm a New York reporter. The team that gave me the most difficulty, the Boston Bruins, because obviously New York and Boston hate each other. Boston was the last team. I closed out every other division except the Atlantic Division. I closed out the Western Conference. I closed out every single thing. Boston was the most difficult one. I had to call in every favor. I had to call in every person who I might have at one point crossed paths with. Eventually, I finally was able to get at Judge Surratt and Andy Brickley. And that was, I remember on social media afterwards, I finally said, the deed is done for a New York writer. Of course, Boston would be the final hill to climb, to paraphrase Howie Rose. And that was that. But no, John Shorthouse was not someone who said yes. In fact, he didn't even respond. But Brendan Batchelor gave plenty of great stuff about his time with the Canucks.
I got to ask T-Bag, what about the Vancouver deal? Good or bad for the Canucks?
Well, it's looking pretty good right now. They haven't lost since the trade, but I think that's just the normal bump that teams get after a major trade. Byam looks good on defense. He reminds me a little bit of Quinn Hughes. He's got some of those same skills so far. Marco Rossi has fit in perfectly with Brock Besser and the other guy, I forget his name. He scored his first goal for the Canucks the other night. So it's looking good right now. So far, it's looking like one of those trades that's going to be good for both teams.
Yeah, but you're a fan of the Canucks. How do you feel about it? I mean, were you shocked to lose a talent like Quinn Hughes?
Absolutely. I mean, possibly the best player in franchise history, and we're going to trade him away. It's like when we traded Pavel Bure. I felt the same way, and so it ripped my heart out at the beginning. But I'm sort of knowing that we were going to lose him anyway. Even if we kept him, we would have lost him in free agency and got nothing. So this way, we get 4 first-round picks. It's looking good, and in a pragmatic manner, looking at it, I'd say it's probably for the best. Quinn Hughes is happy. We're happy so far, and yeah, it's looking like it's going to be.
Could you say that it's addition by subtraction?
I wouldn't characterize it as that. I mean, Quinn Hughes gave his all. He was a good captain, and so he wasn't. When Marcus Naslund, when we traded him to the Rangers, or we let him go to free agency, I can't remember which, but that was addition by subtraction because he was kind of mopey and he didn't want to be here anymore, and he was kind of sucking the energy out of the room, and so I I I think Quinn Hughes was still a positive influence on the team. He was a good guy in the room, and I don't see it as that at all.
Okay, I got a question for Matthew because we're talking about how everything has changed. Now it seems the quality of writing doesn't matter anymore. It matters to me as a writer, but everything seems to be who's going to get the scoop, who's going to get, and of course, the so-called king of the insiders, if you can call him that, is Elliot Friedman. Do you agree with me or that? What do you think?
So I think the king's crown is held by a couple of people. I wouldn't say that Elliot Friedman is necessarily the king above all the others, because I mean, if you look at it, Kevin Weeks, Darren Drager, Chris Johnston, Pierre LeBrun, they're right there as well. But definitely like that quartet or whatnot, they would certainly make up the best that there is. I do have to agree with you that there is a rush for people to be first instead of necessarily right. I will say, when it comes to groundbreaking blockbuster trades, it seems NHL general managers are spying on me and just are waiting for me to be away from a computer, because there have been 3 blockbuster trades in 2025. Okay. Mikko Rantanen the first time around. Forget the second time around because you knew he was going to go. JT Miller, and then Quinn Hughes. All three happened late on a Friday night after the news cycle while I was staying at my best friend's apartment with no access to my computer. I kid you not, and it's like your old intern Arthur Staple used to joke how Lou Lamoriello, when he was GM of the Islanders, would make a trade or a move only when Arthur was in the air traveling from place to place. NHL GMs are just waiting for me to, on a Friday night, to be staying at my best friend's apartment, and that way they can make a blockbuster deal and I can't react to it. But, writing has definitely changed in it. I will say the Quinn Hughes deal, I'm going to have to push back against one thing. It is a little addition by subtraction, because one thing that we noted from speaking to the Devils players afterwards, and one thing that I've heard out of Vancouver as well, it was hanging over the heads of a lot of players on both teams, because players are human. As much as people don't want to treat the players as if they're human, they are human, and they do have normal human emotions. Now, are they professional? Do they have to, learn to tune out the noise? Absolutely. And by and large, they do that very well. But it still hangs over them. And so, the Devils players didn't really want to admit it, but Sheldon Keefe pretty much admitted that it was hanging over them. We heard similar things coming out of Vancouver that, it became a distraction. And when things are a distraction, it's going to weigh on the team. When Matt Zuccarello was going to be traded from the Rangers to I think he went to Dallas first. And I remember in the room after a morning skate, we were on the road somewhere, I can't remember where, and he was crying, and he literally said, and this was a rare admission for an active hockey player, I can't eat, I can't sleep because I'm afraid I'm going to get traded. So as much as, yeah, you can say, well, things had to be done. You knew Quinn Hughes was unhappy there. You knew you were going to lose him in free agency. It is a little addition by subtraction, because everything weighs on the teams involved, because you're just like, oh my God, am I going to get traded? Am I going to get traded? Am I, is my best friend going to get traded? Is my roommate going to get traded? Am I going to have to find out how to pay the rent now that at so-and-so is being traded and we've been splitting an apartment for 6 months? So that's my take on that.
What about the Rangers? What do you think has been the core issue with them, and how do you fix it?
I'm going to be very blunt right now, and I'm going to be very blunt because I know they can't possibly punish me any worse. They are mentally soft. They are a mentally soft team. Okay, the New York Rangers players. I'm not talking about the coach. I'm not talking about anyone else. The players are a mentally soft team, and if you look at it, the core, yes, they got rid of Jacob Trouba. Yes, they got rid of Chris Kreider. So things have changed a little bit. Mika Zibanejad is a soft player. Artemi Panarin is a soft player. Vincent Trocheck, maybe he's not as soft as the two of them, but, he's not exactly, Mr. Grits. JT Miller, for all of his bluster about no BS, well, it's a little difficult for a captain to be taken seriously when he doesn't do anything well right now. Now, maybe he's nursing a minor injury still. We know he's been hurt twice this year. Who knows? Alexis Lafreniere, I mean, the year before he was due to become a restricted free agent, he had a breakout year. Now, some people thought, okay, well, he's maturing now. Other people thought, well, maybe he knows that he's up for a contract and he's extra motivated. Well, the year that they gave him the deal, what was it, 2 months into the season? He came out playing fairly well. Then he gets the deal, and his production has cratered ever since, which goes to show he didn't mature in that breakout year. He was extra motivated because he wanted to get the money. What the Rangers should have done, and yes, you can say, oh, well, maybe it would have cost them more. They should have waited until the end of that year when he became a restricted free agent. Rangers didn't make the playoffs. So what would have happened? They would have, or even, I'm sorry, they made the playoffs. They still would have had, until July 1st to negotiate with him before any other team could have made him an offer sheet or anything. So then they would have had at least, 6 weeks to 2 months to be able to say, "Hey, listen, let's negotiate a deal right now." And if he would have had a second straight breakout year, okay, yeah, it would have been more than the 7 whatever million he's making a year. Maybe it would have been 9. But at least you would have seen, okay, it could be worth it. And if his production still would have cratered, you know, before the end of the season, then you say, okay, well, listen, Lexus, you're not worth this. Maybe we get him for 4 million. They acted too rashly when they knew that he was, it was a motivation factor more than a maturation factor. They've had how many coaches now that have tried to get them to play north-south instead of east-west? David Quinn got done in by them. Gerard Gallant got done in by them. Peter Laviolette got done in by them. Mike Sullivan might be the most, carry the most weight out of those 4 coaches, in terms of the best resume and everything. I think it's without argument to say that he's done the most out of those 4 coaches. He's not getting them to do any better. They have a flawed roster that obviously that doesn't fall on Sullivan. That falls on Drury and the front office. They, they don't like to go in and continuously play a north-south game. When things go bad, when they face adversity, when things don't go their way, they slip into bad habits. And as much as you have young players like Will Tully, who have come up and done reasonably well, when you have young players who are watching veteran players essentially not listen to the coaching staff, because the veteran players are going out there playing east-west. They're not adhering to the north-south, get into the offensive zone and do your thing. They're not listening to it. So the rookies, the young kids are looking at them saying, well, if the veterans aren't going to listen to the coaching staff, why should we? So you have a problem there in that there's a disconnect. And again, this isn't on Mike Sullivan. I firmly believe this is not on Mike Sullivan. He's tried to get them to play a defensive game. He's tried to get them to play a structured game. And when they do so, they don't have the talent necessary. So they're essentially a 2-line team if you look at it. Okay? They've got Panarin, Zibanejad, and Miller. Then they've got Trochet, Lafreniere, and Tully. They're a 2-line team, which in today's NHL is not going to cut it. You need to roll 4 lines if you're going to be a contender. And they don't have that. They don't even have a true third line, really. As much as Noah Laba's been, better than advertised, they don't really have a third line. And they can't seem to piece things together because they either play defensively like Sullivan wants to, and then they don't score because they just protect the house too much, or they don't listen to Sullivan, they don't try to score and give up a million rush chances. So they need to break up the team. I'm not saying to send out another letter, but they need to essentially start over from scratch. Not that Jim Dolan and Chris Drury have an appetite for that, but that's what they need to do.
Leaf seems to be having the same problem, the softness, the power play. And how come the richest teams of the league are not doing so well?
Well, I don't think it has anything to do with whether they're a rich team or a poor team. If you look at the Maple Leafs over the last decade, roughly, what have they been? They've been a regular season powerhouse. They've been a perennial first round and one and done team in the playoffs. Yes, I know they've gone to the second round twice and then got stomped out both times. They've been built around their core 4 or core 5. Matthews has had a few injury issues. Tavares, as much as I know Maven, still carries a grudge against him for the way he left the Islanders. He's been, pretty good player up there. William Nylander went from, an ancillary piece to a superstar to, maybe he's taking a bit of a step back. Mitch Marner's gone in Vegas. He essentially ran out of town by the Toronto fans. If you listen to how he talked about everything, Morgan Riley is Morgan Riley. They still have goaltending issues. for 10 years now, it's one thing to have a 1A, 1B. They've never had that true number one goalie who, just puts the team on their back. Defensively, and again, Morgan Riley aside, defensively, they've been very similar to the Edmonton Oilers in terms of they have their moments when they can clamp down, but for the most part, they're not they're not overly strong on the blue line in terms of defending. You want to talk about blue line train offense, that's another story. They are pretty good at that. They've lacked depth in terms of, third and fourth lines over the years. Some years a little bit better than others. And they are a highly skilled team that, unlike Tampa, who was highly skilled in 2018, 2019, Tampa got humbled and they realized we have to add more sandpaper, but they added sandpaper without sacrificing skill. Toronto and the Rangers, when they sacrifice skill for sandpaper, they don't keep the same level of skill, which is a problem. You still need skill. It's still the National Hockey League. You still need skill. And for them to, if you sacrifice skill for sandpaper, well, that sandpaper better have some skill. You bring in Ryan Reeves Ryan Reeves, as much as he could knock out any of the four of us very easily, he's not a skilled player. He doesn't bring any skill. So when they do things like that, it doesn't help the team as much as you might think. So again, it has nothing to do with rich team versus poor team. It's how the team is constructed. I mean, would anyone say that the Columbus Blue Jackets or the Utah Mammoth are rich teams? No. But they're building, they're doing things, at least what seems to be the right way for right now. And so you have to just find that way to go about it. And Toronto, much like New York, doesn't really have much of an appetite to tear it down fully and then rebuild. And that's an overarching problem.
Listen, T-Bag sees the Western teams and we don't. I got to ask T-Bag, Colorado going to win the Cup with what they have?
Not a good possibility. I'm not sure they're built for the playoffs, but they have all the tools. I mean, their forwards are great, their defense is great, their goaltending is good. So yeah, they've got all the pieces in place to do it. But I'm still picking Vegas.
Well,
I
why
just think
would you say, if you're telling me that they got everything on Colorado, why wouldn't they be favored to win the Cup?
Well, I'm not saying they're not favored. I probably right now they're probably the odds-on favorite, but I just the playoffs are a different animal than the regular season. It's been shown time and time again. I mean, Los Angeles finished 8th and barely got into the playoffs and won the cup. When was it? 2012 or 2013? And so, you know, being good in the regular season or even being great in the regular season. I mean, when was the last time a President's Trophy team won the cup? I mean, it doesn't translate to playoff success. So I'm still picking Vegas, who I think have the skill and the grit, the sandpaper, that combination. I think, and I think they're just biding their time till they get to the playoffs. And I think Colorado, absolutely, Colorado has a chance, and I may be eating my words in June, but I think I'm still picking Vegas.
Matthew, who's going to win the Cup?
So
Don't beat around the bush.
I'm not going to beat around the bush. I've been pitching since before the season started that it would be Vegas, Colorado in the Western Final, and whoever would win that would win the Cup. Now, the only reason I'm saying that Florida doesn't go for a three-peat is between the injuries and the fact that they've had 3 long seasons in a row, short off seasons. I just don't think Florida can do it again. I think they will just run out of gas, even though if anyone watched them last night against Carolina, in the last couple minutes, that was pretty damn impressive what they did. But the thing is with Colorado, and they proved this in 22 when they won the Cup, if they're so overwhelming offensively, sometimes you can get away with not necessarily having that grit and sandpaper in the playoffs, because they proved it in 22 that they were just so overwhelming and so dominant that they were able to do it. Vegas is without Alex Pietrangelo, which is a loss both on and off the ice. On the Blue Line Blast podcast this week, myself and my co-host Jim Berenger, we talked with Stephen Marsh, who covers the Golden Knights, about the loss of Pietrangelo. And that's a big blow for them that Pietrangelo's never going to play again, essentially. Eichel, of course, yeah, he's hurt right now, but he will be back. Shea Theodore's hurt right now. He will be back. Mark Stone always gets hurt. Goaltending, will they not? Vegas should be in the picture. Colorado should be in the picture. What I'm worried about with Colorado is, does Mackenzie Blackwood and Scott Wedgwood, the two former Devils, do they keep up doing what they're doing when they've never in their careers shown that they can maintain this over the long haul?
And you know what? You know what the answer is? They don't have the goaltending out west that we have in the East. I don't think there's a single goaltender, whether you can take Colorado or you can take Vegas, they don't have top flight goaltending, and I think that's going to hurt them. But on the other hand, I agree with you. There is no way, no team is going to be able to win 3 straight cups, and Florida will lose because of attrition. I've said this before, and I say it again. Just like you said, it's too much hockey. And right now, I have to say, some team in the East is going to win it.
Well, if a team in the East is going to win it, I'm going with Tampa. I think Tampa has shown this year that maybe that window's not closing as quickly as everyone thought it was going to. Tampa's still a scary team. If Tampa can get past Florida in the playoffs, whether that's first round, second round, it won't be in the third round more than likely. I don't think there's a team in the Metropolitan Division who could face Tampa in the Eastern Final that would be able to beat Tampa. I just don't see it. Washington's not going to beat them. Carolina's not going to beat them. Devils aren't going to beat them. Rangers aren't making the playoffs as far as I'm concerned. Philadelphia's not making the playoffs as far as I'm concerned. Pittsburgh's not going to beat them. The Islanders aren't going to beat them. Who's going to beat them?
Well, you're right. On the way I'll agree with you is that there is no coach in the West who can match with Cooper in Tampa Bay and Paul Maurice with the Panthers. They're the 2 best coaches in the league, and I think that you're right about Tampa. And Tampa has the goalie, and they've got the coach. And I think it's going to be. I have to say it. Tampa's a very good choice. Very good choice.
I think,
and it's not going to be the Maple Leafs
Bobrovsky.
because they never make it.
Looking at things right now, this team isn't even sniffing the playoffs this year. It's a disaster.
Matthew, you mentioned Andy Brickley earlier, and I just want to tell the story of a game I remember watching. Boston was playing, and Ray Bourque took a slap shot, and Andy Brickley happened to be standing beside the net, and the puck went off Andy Brickley's face, and the puck went in the net along with 6 of Andy Brickley's teeth. I was like,
Andy Brickley played for the Devils the great year when they made the playoffs in '88, and Andy Brickley was one of the greatest penalty killers, along with Dougie Brown. And later, of course, it was Johnny Madden with Pandolfo. But what a great guy. Andy Brickley, one of the best guys I ever met in the business.
Brickley, he told a story about how when hockey was done with him, in terms of playing, when hockey was done with him, he wasn't done with hockey. He didn't want to leave hockey. He went to the IHL for a little bit. When the NHL was done with him, he wanted to keep going. He never thought he was gonna leave the ice. And that's part of why he became a broadcaster, because he still gets to be there. If you look at it, play-by-play broadcasters and color analysts generally have 2 very different ways that they get to where they are. Play-by-play broadcasters are generally people like the 4 of us who didn't play the game. Maybe they're journalist major, maybe they're broadcast major, whatever the school wants to term the degree. And they learn, they apply their trade, and they get there. Color analysts, more often than not, there are some exceptions. Like Dan Wood out in Anaheim for a little while. He was a color analyst without being a former player. Um, Generally, color analysts are former players, and that's important because they're the ones who know the game better than anyone else.
What?
All of us up in the press box can watch the game, but we don't know the game as well as everyone else.
I want to know from you. TNT better than ESPN? And how do you compare Gretzky with Messier as an analyst?
Wow. So I'm gonna go TNT better than ESPN because Maven, you and I have our pals there, Kenny Albert and Brendan Burke. If you're gonna get me to go against Kenny and Brendan, I'm sending them after you because I am absolutely not going against them. As for Gretzky and Messier, they both have a ways to go before they are really solid. I think Hank Lundqvist is actually the best of those three. Not that you gave him as a choice. TNT, I think, certainly has the better panel of analysts, as much as I cannot stand, and I will let this be my hot take, I cannot stand Bissonnette. And he can come after me the same way he's gone after Butch Scoring. I cannot stand them, but I think TNT is better than ESPN on this.
I don't know why Bissonnette is popular, to tell you the truth.
They're going on Netflix now. Spittin' Chicklets is leaving YouTube and heading to Netflix in early 2026.
What is good about, you tell me, what's so good about Bissonnette?
Nothing.
I don't think they're that good. We're better.
Okay.
Bissonnette is allowed.
They're controversial.
I'd just like to ask Nathan one more question. 1980 Islanders. My favorite Islander player is Butch Goring because I remember I was so tired of Montreal winning that I was rooting for either Philadelphia or the Islanders to win. But Islanders, I love Butch Goring because he came in on the trade and he made an immediate difference. You could just see the difference in the team when he stepped on the ice for the first time. And I was just wondering if you ever got to interview him.
Yeah, I've interviewed Butch a number of times for the Maven, of course, for the Official Report newsletter. And then actually, when Butch went into the New York State Hockey Hall of Fame in the inaugural class, I want to say that was 2021. I actually sat at his table during the induction ceremony, and I did an on-camera interview with him. And I will say, I think I got him to break just a little bit. He might be one of the toughest nuts to crack in terms of getting him to actually, give more than the surface level. And I got him to crack just a little bit. And if I don't do anything for the rest of my career, I will always hang my hat that I was able to get Butch to open up just a little bit.
The thing about that teabag in 1980, Butch deserves all the credit that you gave him. But there were two other guys who made a difference. One of them was Kenny Morrow, who enabled them to make the trade because once Kenny Morrow came up, they were able to throw Dave Lewis into the deal with Billy Harris. And the other one who everybody has forgotten is Gordy Lane. Gordy Lane was one of the toughest, meanest players I've ever seen. And that's the kind of guy the Islanders did not have. They had great, tough guys, but nobody like Gordy Lane, so I have to give him a plug. Can I tell my joke now? This takes place in 1926 in a schoolroom on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. It's a very New York joke, okay? So the teacher says to the students, who can tell me where the Romanian border is? Who can tell me where the Romanian border is? And this kid gets up and he says, in the park with my aunt, and my mother doesn't trust him.
All right, we'll wrap it up here. Big thanks to Matthew Blittner for joining us. And of course, thank you, Stan and Jerry. Thanks to everyone for listening. Make sure to subscribe to Bottle Rocket, wherever you get your podcasts. And we'll catch you next time.